With that, I will introduce our two speakers. First will be Kevin Bjorn, who is the technical director here at IRIS, which means he oversees all aspects of the technical operations of the organization. And that means working with member universities, IRIS staff, and other partners like the federal government, and more recently, a wide variety of data providers. Kristina Ko is the Assistant Vice President of Federal Relations for Research for the University of Michigan Office of Research. She serves as the university's primary contact with Congress, the executive branch, federal agencies, research organizations, professional societies, and public policy organizations, I'm sure among others, to ensure that they know about the achievements, needs, and opportunities arising from the U of M research community. So first I'm going to throw it to Kevin, who's going to give an overview of IRIS and who we are and what we do. And then he'll let Kristina go over how she uses our data and other data for her government relations work. So here's Kevin. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So as Dan said, I'm Kevin Bjorn, the tech director here at IRIS. What we're going to do first is I'm going to provide some context for everyone. As we talk about using IRIS data in government relations, I want everyone to understand how IRIS works and where the data comes from. And then I'll hand it over to Kristina and she'll talk about use cases and how they've employed it. And then after that, there'll be an opportunity for more questions and answers. And if time permits, I may show off a few other tools and use cases that have been presented to us over time and that we've developed in the last 6 months or so. So let me move forward here through the slides. We already did the roadmap. So what is IRIS? IRIS, or the Institute for Research on Innovation in Science, is an IRB-approved data repository that's housed at the University of Michigan and specifically within the Institute of Social Research at U of M. And what we are is we are an anchor organization for a consortium of currently 35 research universities from across the country who all participate in sharing data for the purpose of understanding and explaining and improving the public value of academic research on all of our campuses. So the way this works is member universities contribute data to IRIS, and this data takes the form of administrative data. So this is the data that exists in our systems to do day-to-day activities on campus. They share data from their procurement system, so vendor purchases, subawards to other research participants. They provide data from their sponsored projects, so this would be the research awards that they receive, and they provide data from their human resources data set, and this would be related to the people who are working on these research projects. We take that data, we clean it, we normalize it, we add labels and do all kinds of magic with it. And then we combine it all together and utilizing some other outside sources, we improve that data by tying it together with data from the US Census Bureau, from external private sector companies like Bureau van Dijk, which is a subsidiary of Moody's, Stepping Blocks, which provides people-level data, other federal sources, NIH, NSF, things like that, and then other private sector sources as well. Utilizing all of this combined data that's linked together, we produce reports that feed back to our member universities. And these are reports and tools that they can use to help explain the value of the scientific research that's being conducted on their campuses in a variety of different ways, to augment their communications, to analyze benchmarking against peer groups, things like that, to better understand the impact of the research that we're all conducting across the country. The other thing that we do is we take that data and we de-identify it. We strip out all the identifying details and we put it into a researcher data set that's then accessible to researchers through our virtual data enclave. And they're able to use that data combined with whatever they bring in to answer interesting questions, to pursue different analyses of the impact of the different types of research that are taking place, the people who are working on it, the types of products that are purchased, all these kinds of things, which they can then use for their own publications, journals, things like that. So at the core of IRIS, that's what we do. So some of our reports that we produce are geared towards an overview of the overall impact of research. Some of them, as you'll see here, are geared towards government relations. Some of them are geared towards understanding economic development, vendor relationships. We have a new tool called the Impact Finder that lets you find interesting and compelling stories for communications purposes, which we may show at the end of this as well. And we put that all together and we make that available to all of our members. Let's see here. So to give you an idea of how this works, what we have here is just a quick diagram that sort of walks you through the process. So NSF provides an award to a member university. That member university uses the funds from that award to hire people to work on it, to buy products, to support it. Think microscopes from Fisher Scientific, rat cages from Bob's Rat Cage Company, things like that. And then they also pay potentially sub-awardees. So they may subcontract out portions of that research to other universities or organizations who then go on to do their own purchases and hiring and things like that. We're able to pull that all together and tell very compelling and interesting stories about the overall state of research across the country. So it's not just for individual universities. We take the aggregate data and we tell these stories at a national level as well. And at the end, you'll see some examples, some use cases, how we use this data in government relations at a national level. These are some visuals that we produce, and that's one of the things that we excel at, is trying to tell stories in a visually appealing way. And so the things that you see here, from campus workforce to employment to team science, funding sequences, congressional spending, economic impact by industry or geography, these are all things that we provide to our members that they can pull out and utilize in any way they see fit. They're able to access the underlying data. They can incorporate these things into their reports. They can print these very easily and just hand them out if they need to. So there's a variety of ways that we provide this information to all of our members. And that's essentially what IRIS is in a nutshell. So now I'm going to hand it over to Kristina, and she's going to talk about use cases as they relate to government relations.
Thanks, Kevin. And good afternoon, everyone. So in preparing for today's discussion, I wasn't really sure where to start and where everyone is in their interest or career in advocating for the nation's research enterprise. So before I jump into how we use IRIS data, or how the University of Michigan uses IRIS data, I thought I would start with a general overview of Michigan's approach to communicating the benefits of research to our policymakers and the importance of using data in general. This will probably sound a little bit basic to some of you. So for the more seasoned government relations colleagues on the call, feel free to tune back in when we get into the discussions on how IRIS data can be used as a powerful tool in your advocacy efforts. Also, I just want to note, as Dan mentioned in the beginning, we do hope that this will be an engaged dialogue. So please feel free to interrupt at any point with questions or comments. But there will also obviously be time at the end to ask any additional questions. So for those of you who may be new to research advocacy or the Advocacy Hill world in general, it's always a nice reminder that in organizing meetings for faculty on the Hill or advocating for an issue, understanding the objective of the meeting is essential. And I'm going to try to pull up my slides. All right. So if you don't understand the purpose of the meeting, of the staff that you're meeting with, they certainly will also have no clue. But it's surprising how often I ask faculty why they want to do a meeting on the Hill, and the response I sometimes get back is kind of a blank stare. So my question is, well, what is your ask? And if you don't have a specific ask, how is what you're sharing helping their bosses advance things that they are interested in or working on? Then the next question is, and how do you communicate this ask or information? The importance of clear and concise messaging is obviously critical, as most of you on this Zoom already know. You have a short amount of time to capture the attention that you are hoping for. So we provide a lot of support to our faculty on how best to communicate their research. Our Institute for Healthcare Policy and Innovation created these really wonderful, I think, one-pager guides on how to create a quick information sheet that external stakeholders can use as a resource, but to also share information in an easily digestible but impactful way. And data can do this quickly. In a simple chart, data can tell a meaningful and impartial story in case for whatever you are advocating for. As an example, here's an information sheet that IHPI put together that presents the findings and impacts of Michigan's Medicaid expansion program over the first 5 years. This handout encapsulates all the crucial pieces of information contained in a very expansive report written by our faculty. Using data and visual aids, IHPI was able to share and build a story about how Medicaid expansion decreased the number of uninsured, decreased the number of hospitals faced with uncompensated care, increased access to a primary care physician or clinic, and decreased ER visits. And they do this all very concisely in clear visual graphics and clear data. Data is important, and typically you can't argue against data or deny the case that data makes. In addition to having a clear ask or objective for sharing your information, it's also really important to make it relevant to your stakeholder. Our stakeholders, for the most part, get it. They get that federal investments in research are critical for innovation. It has an impact on our ability to find cures for diseases. It supports our national security and industry. They get that a knowledge economy is important. But they don't always understand that there is a direct impact on their constituents, even if our university isn't located in their district. They don't realize that universities are often the largest employers in their states and that universities support businesses in their districts, whether it's located in their district or not. And this is where IRIS data comes in. IRIS data on the impact of American university research spending tells an impactful national story. This national data has become particularly important as the research university community continues to seek emergency supplemental funds to address the negative impacts COVID-19 has had on university research enterprises. And we have data for that too, which I can touch on briefly later. But for the nation, we know that research universities generate scientific knowledge. We also know that research universities play a substantive role in the US economy. But I've sometimes struggled in the past with really showing how or putting data to this statement beyond breaking up how research has been used to support the iPhone, for example, which is a big deal, but also I've been told a tired example. And we have the data to tell this story, and IRIS has used this data to build the impact story of American university research spending. Through their analysis and spending data from 2018 and 2019, and from more than 400,000 funded university research projects, we know universities spent nearly $14 billion on goods and services in all 435 congressional districts to support on-campus research activities. I can also use this data to clearly showcase the impact federally funded research has in supporting the nation's workforce. This chart shows the percentages of students and trainees, professional staff, and faculty members paid by research funding from a variety of sources. This data tells us that American universities used research funds to pay for more than 560,000 people on campuses across the country. That's more than airlines and more than the utilities. More than 300,000, or half of these employees, are students or trainees, which feeds the talent pipeline of industry and supports our nation's ability to compete in a global economy, and bolsters industries that capitalize on the creation of new discoveries. As we face a new Congress next year, this information will also be critical in orienting new members of Congress on the value of research universities and federal investments in research. I'm guessing most members of Congress do not realize that universities are the largest employers in 24 states, and they are among the top 5 in 44. Or that students who are paid by grants go on to take jobs in all 50 states, and most of them work in industry. This data has also been used to support the need for the Research Investment to Spark the Economy Act, also known as the RISE Act, a bipartisan bill that was introduced in both the House and Senate that would provide emergency supplemental funds related to the current pandemic. This data has been cited in congressional Dear Colleague letters to congressional leadership, CRS reports, and in testimony before Congress. On this note, IRIS also recently aggregated 10 universities to show data from 10 universities to showcase how the recent pandemic has impacted 10 member institutions. From this data, we can clearly show that in April and May, university research spending decreased tremendously, indicating the shutdown of research labs on campuses due to the coronavirus will happen. So this is the April and May data, all the while protecting more than 98% of their research workforce through continued salary support. This data provides further evidence that emergency supplemental funds will be needed to help our research labs recover from the pandemic. Hopefully, this information sheet is not new to you, and whether you are a member of IRIS or not, this national impact story is available for anyone to use in their advocacy efforts. However, as a member, and I promise IRIS didn't ask me to pitch the merits of being a member, the institutional specific data has been incredibly valuable in our discussion with member offices, especially during appropriation season when we are advocating for continued or increased research investments and making the pitch about how members whose districts we are not always in should care about us. In addition to agency one-sheeters like the one displayed right here that we share with our delegation, outlining our research expenditures by agency, providing data on how many faculty and students federal grants from that agency supports, and examples of how taxpayer dollars are being used to fund research, IRIS data adds another layer of information on top of all of this. Institution-specific reports, which are easy to generate through their member portal, create fact sheets that I can share with staffers. And beyond the examples of research our faculty are doing and the new knowledge our faculty are generating and the innovation pipeline these dollars wind up supporting, I can show immediate data about how many jobs these funds support and how many students we are educating to become the next innovators and scientists. It's a powerful statement for us to be able to say that after 5 years of leaving U of M, we know that more than 60% of research-funded graduate students head to the private sector and make, on average, more than $150,000 a year. In a state like Michigan, where we have 16 members of Congress, and we have to make the case about why they should care about Michigan when we aren't direct constituents, having the ability to remind them that we educate students from their districts and can show how much we spent in their districts gives them a distinct justification for why they should care. This data will also be particularly helpful next Congress when we also have the task of orienting new members to the Michigan delegation, as I suspect many of you will also be tasked to do. And I will note that IRIS, in working with members, are also always taking suggestions on these congressional fact sheets. And obviously, this is not a fact sheet that we would share with our members in the Michigan delegation, but they can tailor these to include information for specific districts. So in addition to the state-specific fact sheet, you can also download spending reports that break down individuals paid by research awards by occupational category. We can also see the breakdown of faculty and students supported by agency. We can also see the breakdown of our expenditures that go to vendors and subawards by the state and nation, clearly showcasing the economic impact that research awards made to our university have on the local, state, and national economy. There's also a vendor report that breaks down what types of vendors these research dollars support. From 2002 to 2018, we know that the University of Michigan spent close to $3 billion in research spending to vendors and subcontractors. Of that, we know that more than $140 million went to more than 2,500 small businesses across the country. We also know that more than 55 million of those dollars went to more than 1,200 minority and women-owned businesses. We can also break down spending by state. If I'm talking to an office from California, I could share that the University of Michigan spent more than $12 million in their state, and that much of those dollars supported small businesses. In addition to that, we support the nation's research-trained, highly skilled workforce. An employee report can generate a clear visual aid showing that almost 60,000 employees supported by research dollars go on to take jobs across the nation. We can also show that the vast majority stay in the state of Michigan. I think that sometimes staffers on the Hill forget that federal research investments play a crucial role in educating the nation's STEM-trained workforce. The IRIS employee report also breaks down what sectors graduate students go on to work in and their average earnings. As a community advocating for investments in federal research investments, data points like this bolsters our stories about why research is critical to finding cures in our national security, but also showcases that, like other sectors of society, research universities also bolster the economy and provides jobs. So on that note, I'll kick this discussion back over to Kevin. And as I mentioned earlier, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I would welcome any thoughts that you all may have on creative ways we can use this data and how you may be using data in your government relations efforts. So thank you.
Thanks, Kristina. All right, now this is the fun part for me. So the beginning I was all scripted, but now it's like I get to be myself and be a little more open-ended. So what can we do to improve the data for government relations? Obviously, the more data we have from our members and the more members we have, the more that we can do with that. One of the things that IRIS really excels at is speedy turnarounds for reports. So one of the nice things with our members is they often bring fresh ideas to us, things that they need, things that they would like to see, things that would help them. And we're able to quickly turn those into things that they can use for their purposes on their campus. And we like to develop things as generally as possible so everyone can use them. And then we like to target particular questions for policymakers, university leadership, things like that, and develop new metrics all the time with our tools here. So what I'd like to do is, if you have questions, now's the perfect time. Start throwing them at us. I'd love to hear them, and Kristina and I can go back and forth and answer them. Otherwise, I can jump in and show you a couple other tools that we have and a couple other use cases that weren't mentioned when Kristina was talking. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? And while you do, I'll start queuing up some things to look at. And one of the things I like to do is get people excited about the possibilities, things that they can do with this data and with the visuals that we produce. So let me get out of this presentation here and bring up my browser. All right. I always find it challenging to share in Zoom because it never lets me share my whole screen. Okay, so here's one of our reports. This is one of our newest ones that we just put together, and we'll be doing a webinar on this specifically down the road. This is our employee report. It talks about the outcomes of federally funded or research funded employees that work on research projects at our universities, where they go, what they do, how much they earn, things like that. This report will be released in the next week or two. I'm using the University of Michigan's report here to demonstrate. Everybody that's an IRIS member would have their own. But what this report basically tells you is where people are going. They come to your university, they participate in research funded training, research projects, and then where do they go when they leave? They get other degrees, they move to other places, they take that knowledge and training with them, they enter the private sector, they become faculty at another university. How are they utilizing their education that they gained at your university? So we can talk about that, we can show you that information, you can drill down, you can see at the state level where people are going, you can drill down into a particular state
Kevin,
and see, yes.
let me stop you. There's a question.
Sure.
Do you collect, the question is, do you collect historical data or just the past year from new members?
So actually the longer the timeline of data, the better the reports you can get from us. So some schools have given us data back as far as 2002. Others have given us just the past few years of data. It's really, a lot of times it's dependent on the enterprise systems that they're utilizing and how often they update those enterprise systems. Lots of our members lose track of data that's older. One of the challenges is when we merge data, say, particularly with the federal systems through the Census Bureau, the older the data is, the better matching that we are able to conduct. This is because there's always a lag in the federal data of a year or 2 years. And then also with some of our private sector partners, there's a lag in people's digital footprints where some of this data comes from. And so the older the data, the better we're able to produce reports for you, the better we're able to define the metrics and results of everything. So the more data, the better. Isn't that always the case with everything though? Go ahead, Dan, do you have another question?
Yeah, another question.
Okay.
Do universities only provide or share the data, or do they also share the needs and perspective?
Both. So of course, the data, of course, is the foundation of what we need to be able to produce meaningful products for you. But we have several mechanisms that allow you to ask us specifically for things that you need. One of them is a committee that we have called the Technical Advisory Group. We also have a Policy and Outreach Group. And so these groups allow members to participate actively in the development and direction of IRIS and the reports that we come up with, the way things are put together. So if there is some specific need that you have on your campus, something that you've wanted to accomplish or something you want to see, you bring that to our attention. If it fits well with what IRIS does, we add that to the queue and eventually turn out a report based on that. Any other questions, Dan? So one of the nice things about IRIS is all of our members have the equal opportunity to participate. We do have a board of directors. The board of directors are elected officials from our member universities. Our member universities get to nominate individuals and then a vote takes place and then they join the board of directors. And so there's a lot of control and input that all our members have in terms of the development and direction of IRIS.
Another question just came in.
Sure.
What's the most productive place to start if you haven't been using IRIS data before?
So is this from an existing member or a prospective member? I'm not quite sure of the context.
I'm not sure either.
What's the most productive place to start?
Why don't you give an answer from both perspectives, Kevin?
Okay. So for existing members, one of the things that we like to do is do campus-wide demos, and we try to bring in constituency from across campus. We like to demonstrate our products to Office of Provost, VPR's office, Gov Relations, Economic Development, Communications, We bring them all in, we show them how they can utilize the products, we show them how other universities have utilized the products, and then hopefully they turn around and they're able to deploy that on their campuses in the same way. For prospective members who are interested in joining, we have a phased membership plan that allows joining to be very easy. It doesn't require all the data up front, it doesn't require payments the first year really. You can get in, you can use Iris, you can see everything. And then as time goes on, you get more and more and more as we develop it. There's a whole other aspect to Iris too. Anyone who's a member has free access to the underlying data. So if you have faculty researchers on your campus, institutional research, things like that, you can actually dive into the micro level data that we maintain in our enclave to provide your own analysis or to validate data that we have against your data, things like that. There's a lot of robust data sharing that goes on between our members and us.
Kevin, if there's a member organization and they know that their institution is a member, but they don't know how to get access to a login, how could they figure that out?
So the easiest way is to just contact us, and we can put you in contact with your local administrator. So every member university has at least one or more local administrators who manage the access to the IRIS portal. The IRIS portal is the mechanism by which you access all the reports and tools. If you're a researcher and you want to gain access to the underlying data, the micro level data, we have a separate mechanism for that where you reach out to us and then we work with you to figure out exactly what your needs are in terms of data access and put that all in place for you.
I'll just add, I'm putting in a couple of links in the chat to our website, a couple of pages. One shows a summary of our reports and another shows some use cases for existing and potential members. So.
Okay. So back to the report here. One of the things we talk about is where people go, the migration of these federally funded employees. We also look at what sectors in industry that they find employment, how many people are going into those sectors. We look at earnings. We can tell you averaging how much people earn. And then we can tell you specifically which companies they go into. And then how many people and what the average or median earnings are there. So we can tell you a lot of information about the people who worked on research on your campus and took it to the wider world. So, you know, this could be used for economic development and other things. We have another tool here, and I may have to reshare. Dan, are you able to see the impact finder?
Yeah, let me ask you one more question though.
Sure.
Can you describe, the question came in, can you describe briefly the relationship that we have, that IRIS has with the Census Bureau?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. So one of the benefits that IRIS has is our close relationship with the U.S. Census Bureau. When IRIS was formed, one of the PIs, actually more than one of the PIs, were employees at the Census Bureau. One became the interim director of the Bureau for a while. The benefit to all that is that IRIS is considered an internal program within the Census Bureau. So we have access to everything that really allows us to put some very interesting metrics together. We've been working with them since the inception of the organization. They've been great data partners with us. Okay, so one of the newest tools that we just put out, and this is actually specifically relevant to communications, economic development, government relations, is being able to identify the impact of research and then finding compelling stories associated with that. University of Michigan first piloted this with us to develop some national marketing campaigns for some things on campus, which turned out very positively. We've since turned that tool from a pilot into a full tool for all of our members to utilize. It allows you to delve into the research that takes place in a variety of different ways. You can look at research impacts at the geographic level, counties. You can look at research impacts based on funding agencies, NIH, NSF, what kind of impact are they making? You can look at different types of economic impact, the vendors, people that are providing goods and services, or sub-awardees, people who are contributing to the research. Abstract information, you can search for specific types of research. And then you can view all of this visually, and you can drill down into information that tells you all sorts of details about that research. And we're constantly adding more information here. But what this would allow you to do is, let's say you wanted to talk about the economic impact in a particular congressional district, or in a particular county, or someplace within any state in the country, actually. You can drill down and you can really see what that research is that's taking place, and the economic impact, the companies that are being affected by that research in positive ways. So, you know, here within this area, this is within Ann Arbor, 554 vendors have received roughly $50 million over the time period specified in the search parameters. But you can drill down, I think this is Lansing, Michigan here. So you can find out, you know, who these vendors are, where they're located, how much money is spent with them. You can dig into the stories that are associated with those companies, what types of research are being conducted with them. And you can write some pretty compelling communications, economic development, gov outreach kind of stuff based on that information. And so I think we released this to our members, I want to say a couple months ago now. And we'll be adding some new updates to that, hopefully in the near future. More questions, Dan?
No, not yet.
Okay, okay. So a couple of the other reports we have, this is our portal here. This is where you access all that information. You can pull it out. Anything that we produce, you can download the underlying data. So you can load it into Tableau. You can create your own metrics. You can combine this with other things. You can also download PDF versions of it to make it easy to hand out. Some of our reports allow you to quickly export images if you want to drop those into presentations. There's 100 different ways here that you can utilize these tools, reports, and data to promote research on your campus and the impact of that in a variety of different ways. So if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to wrap things up here.
Kevin, can I ask a quick question?
Sure, yeah.
I'd love to ask those who are on the Zoom, if possible, if you're comfortable speaking up, whether or not you have used IRIS data in your advocacy, how you've used it, and whether or not, and how maybe you messaged the data included.
Kristina, hi, it's Doug Wasitis from IU. After the Big Ten meeting in Michigan last year, I think, we went on the site and pulled some of the data, my state relations colleague, Trevor Foudy, and I did, and shared it with the delegation, and he used it with some of the state lawmakers just as points of information. That was the last time we went on, but this webinar is really, it's a great reminder that this tool is there, and I expect going forward, we'll make more use of it.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, we always use it and incorporate it into all of our appropriations meetings, just as a reminder that there's a huge economic impact of these funds. It's actually interesting. We've also had members of Congress specifically ask when we've gone in to meet them, what is the economic impact in their districts? And I think they're often surprised when we can just pull that number out and say, here it is, because they're not expecting that typically. So it's just always interesting to hear how other universities are using it, and whether or not any of my colleagues are members and didn't realize that they had access to this information.
I think that was our case at the Big Ten meeting. I don't think we fully understood that we were members. So that was helpful, as is this update.
Thanks, Doug.
There is another question regarding the impact finder tool.
Yeah.
And that how granularly, I guess, can you define the geographic area that you're looking at?
So using the geography filter, right now you can get down to the county level, but that's really the starting point. It'll filter out all the other research that doesn't happen within that county, and then you could drill down deeper. You can also select multiple counties. So if you had an area that crosses multiple counties, you could select them all, and then that would show up in the impact finder, and then you could go through that research that way.
Didn't mean to cut off anyone who was getting ready to respond to Kristina's question, if there are any others.
So I see a question from Amelia. So are the map filters available at a regional or local level? So right now, we've designed them to operate at the state and the county level, but we can always add refinement to it. So if there was other divisions that make sense, say a state legislative district or a congressional district, or a grouping of states, or a particular corridor that's of interest, we can certainly try to add those in. It's all a matter of adding GIS layers to it, so it's all possible. Okay, so I think that's it for everybody. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or Iris in general. I love to talk to people. Once you get me on the phone, it's hard to get rid of me. But feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions, and have a great day.
So there's one final question that just came in.
Good, yeah.
Is the database limited to universities only, or is it open to our affiliates, such as research institutes or hospitals?
So does that mean, is the data available to these organizations, or can these organizations be a part of IRIS to get similar reports? So the data is available to anyone. Yes, so the data is available to anyone, but right now we've sort of geared the data import and ingest specifically for universities, but I'm open-minded to talk to other organizations if they'd like to explore the possibilities.